Hello, on behalf of Observer Research Foundation, let me welcome you all to this very special session where we are launching a very significant report on UK-India education partnership titled Natural Partners, Building a Comprehensive UK-India Knowledge Partnership. And this report lays out a very expansive agenda for how UK can deploy its knowledge assets, its knowledge base, to develop and to carve out a UK-India comprehensive knowledge partnership at a time of great geopolitical and geoeconomic turn around the world, as well as significant shifts that we are witnessing in British and Indian foreign policy postures. We are delighted that we have Mr. Joe Johnson with us today to talk about the report and its findings. He's a Presidential Professorial Fellow at King's College London and Senior Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School. I also am very honored and delighted that we are able to host the two High Commissioners today for this launch. His Excellency Gayatri Sakumar, Indian High Commissioner to the UK, and His Excellency Alex Ellis, who is the British High Commissioner in India. So welcome both ma'am and sir. We look forward to your interventions in the beginning. Followed by this intervention, we'll have a panel discussion involving policymakers and two senior academics, Professor Kshitish Kapoor, President and Principal, King's College London, Professor M. Jagdish Kumar, who is Vice Chancellor, Jawaharlal Nehru University, India's premier university at the moment. And we have Ms. Anna Roy, Senior Advisor, Niti Aayog, who is engaged with policymaking at the highest levels at various, especially on education and higher education sector. So welcome everyone, welcome to this event and welcome to this launch. Without further ado, let me give the floor to Joe Johnson for his initial remarks and comments on the report, on report's findings, and how he foresees the future of this comprehensive knowledge partnership that he and his co-authors envision in this report unfold in the coming years. Joe, over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Harsh, and thank you to the Observer Research Foundation for convening this webinar. It's an honor to have our two wonderful High Commissioners with us, and also such a distinguished lineup of discussants to reflect on the report and its conclusions afterwards. This report, Harsh, was a collaboration led by King's College London that brought together a number of different parties around the world. And I should mention Shashank Vera of Hearth Advisors in Delhi, Jonathan Adams of Clarivate, Janet Ilieva of Education Insights, and Jonathan Grant of Different Angles. These were my co-authors. And this paper aimed to be a companion report to the 21 report we wrote on the China question, how to manage risks and maximize benefits from partnership in higher education and research with China. Now, that paper had identified some pretty significant dependencies on China within the UK higher education and research system. And that paper really provides the context for our reflections on the state of the UK's knowledge relations with India. Needless to say, China is an increasingly powerful actor in international education and research. It accounts for 2 out of every 9 international students in the UK and about a quarter of the UK's education exports, making it our single biggest market for our most important services export. People don't actually realize that education services represent a bigger share of our export basket than even financial services. So it's an extremely important part of our trade picture. On the research side, on its current trajectory, China is on track to become the dominant global research power. Its R&D spending has grown fourfold in the past 10 years to match that of the US and also to match the European Union. It's risen from 9th place to 2nd place in terms of the UK's research partners, and if that continues, it could even overtake the US to become the UK's single most important R&D partner within the space of the next 5 years. And this is a quite simply stunning development that is all the more remarkable for being so unexamined in public policy terms. UK-China collaborations are increasingly central to maintaining the UK's position as a leading knowledge economy. Our report found that in 20 subject areas, collaborations with China accounted for more than 20% of the UK's high-impact research. And there were 3 very big and very important fields: automation and control systems, telecommunications, and material science, in which collaborations with China represented more than 30% of such output. Now, the depth of the knowledge relationship with China brings great benefits, but it also carries with it significant risks. And these risks are increasingly well understood, and they include the lack of financial resilience of our higher education system and of individual institutions within it, arising from dependence on income flows from students from one country, the extensive cross-subsidies within UK higher education, which mean that structurally loss-making research, undertaken in great part by our Russell Group universities, this research is underpinned by these same fee-paying international students. Other risks include, as I mentioned, the exceptionally high share of research in key scientific domains undertaken in collaboration with scientists from one country. And then lastly, of course, the associated threats to freedom of speech, academic freedom, and institutional autonomy that this relationship can, in certain circumstances, generate. So the China report proposed a number of institution-level and system-level mechanisms to help key stakeholders understand and manage and monitor these risks. And the idea of the report was to escape a sort of tendency to answer the China question in a very binary way, as if there was no possible middle ground between a naive embrace on the one hand and defiant disengagement and decoupling on the other. And I'm really pleased that some of its central recommendations over the course of the last year have been taken forward. One of them was that the government should publish an annual risk assessment of the UK's dependence on third countries across different areas of research and operate a traffic light system to warn policymakers of overdependence in particular areas. This task is now being undertaken by a new Office for Science and Technology Strategy in the Cabinet Office, which is being chaired by the UK's Chief Scientific Advisor. Another idea being taken forward was the creation of a new body, which has been named the Research Collaboration Advice Team, which is going to help UK researchers make the most of their international collaborations while helping to protect themselves from those who seek to compromise the UK's national security. Which all brings us on to India. One of the China report's key recommendations was for the UK government, research funding agencies, higher education regulators, sector representative bodies, and universities themselves to take a more purposeful and proactive approach to diversification. This latest King's College-led paper aims to contribute to that process by assessing the necessary steps to bring about an intensification of higher education and research ties with India. If there is one country today with the human capital and economic potential to equal China and to become a knowledge partner of comparable importance for the UK, it is, of course, India. Although the two giant countries both have immense educational, economic, and scientific potential, their current relationship to the UK and to many other nations of the world differs dramatically. The sheer number of potential flashpoints with a newly assertive China means that the risk of some kind of geopolitical disruption to the very extensive UK-China knowledge economy relationship is material. By contrast, touch wood, a structural breakdown in relations with India, the world's largest democracy, is almost inconceivable. The UK and India have shared interests and democratic values that underpin their modern relationship, enabling them to work together to tackle COVID, climate change, extremism of various sorts, and a whole host of other shared challenges. To date, though, I think it's fair to say that in crucial respects, the bilateral relationship has been something of a disappointment and represents considerable unfulfilled potential. Judged by the crucial trade yardstick, for example, the two countries have become progressively less important to each other over time. The UK is now the 14th most important trading partner for India, having been second as recently as 1999. Commentators on the post-Cold War UK-India relationship have long looked for a game changer that would enable the two countries to fill more of the huge promise in their bilateral relationship. Well, two game changers have now come along at once: China and the need in the UK post-Brexit to embody the global Britain idea and highlight the advantages of leaving the European Union. There is now a seemingly mutual desire to make things happen that is really palpable to seasoned observers of Delhi-London dynamics. As part of this process, India and the UK have this month launched negotiations on a free trade agreement with the goal of an early harvest agreement in months to come. And this will build on the enhanced trade partnership that the two countries announced in May 2020 and fulfill a key element of the Roadmap 2030, the plan set out by the two prime ministers to revitalize bilateral ties and to pave the way for a comprehensive strategic partnership. This paper, which we're publishing now, examines how a comprehensive knowledge partnership could provide a much needed focus for these efforts to deepen bilateral ties. It explores how the UK, as part of its tilt to the Asia-Pacific post-Brexit, could deploy its knowledge assets, notably its universities and its science base, in a more strategic way, with a country destined by its sheer size to play a crucial role in the geopolitics and global economy of the 21st century. The first section of the paper focuses on the contribution that the UK, through its universities, can make to human capital formation in India, home to the world's largest youthful population under the age of 25, representing today over 600 million people. India's demographic dividend has the potential to be the country's main source of economic growth over coming decades, but of course whether it fulfills that potential depends in large part on raising average levels of educational attainment. Completing upper secondary education has become a minimum requirement for young adults navigating the modern economy. Yet the share of 25 to 34-year-olds who leave school without completing upper secondary education is higher in India than in any country in the world, at just over 2/3, compared with an average in the OECD of 15%. The new national education policy proposes major reforms to address India's human capital challenges. Among its many objectives, the bulk of which naturally focus on primary and secondary education, it aims to improve the quality of domestic higher education institutions, ensure that India is recognized as a global education hub, and double the gross enrollment ratio in higher education from 26% in 2018 to 50% in 2035. This goal for gross tertiary enrollment is a challenging one. To create enough university and college spaces for 1 in 2 school leavers will mean significant expansion of the sector and massive increase in its seat capacity. Implementation will be a major undertaking. In the meantime, there will continue to be significant push factors behind outbound student mobility, and these explain why India is today the second largest source country of globally mobile students, with around 500,000 pursuing learning opportunities overseas each year. This is a staggering 10 times more than the 49,000 students India welcomes from other countries. This 1 to 10 inward to outward mobility ratio suggests that the internationalization of the Indian higher education system and knowledge economy has barely started. In sharp contrast to the way in which China has made education a central part of its Belt and Road Initiative and become the world's 4th largest recipient of international students, India today doesn't feature in the list of top 15 destination countries, notwithstanding the incredible potential of great global brands such as the IITs. In recognition of this acute supply-side bottleneck in domestic provision and its lack of institutions high up global rankings, the government of India intends to expand and consolidate existing higher education institutions to create a new cadre of world-class universities with the designation of 20 so-called institutions of eminence, which will be granted a significant degree of regulatory autonomy. The NEP also proposes measures to liberalize India's regulatory environment for foreign education provision on Indian soil. It aims to attract global top 10 universities, to set up branch campuses and other tie-ups. In the past, these measures have stalled, but this time things may be different, given Prime Minister Modi's strong commitment to implementation of the NEP. The second part of the paper examines the bilateral research relationship. This paper provides evidence to support increased funding to research collaboration with India, which would accelerate India's rise up the ranks of the UK's R&D partners. Our research notes that India-UK collaborative research is not only of higher average field-weighted citation impact than the UK's own research average. Strikingly, since 2010, it has also been of higher average field-weighted citation impact than the UK's collaborative research with China. This demonstrates, to my mind, the importance of investing more in the UK-India research partnerships. Prime Minister Modi has set out a number of objectives to, in his words, revolutionize the landscape of Indian science and technology. Initiatives include increasing the share of public spending on R&D, creating a new national research funding agency, increasing technology self-reliance and indigenization, and significant increases in the numbers of researchers active in India. The UK, to my mind, has a very clear interest in supporting India as it works to achieve its objective to become a top 3 scientific superpower over the course of the next decade. Our report finally recommended that the two countries seek to put in place a number of key building blocks to help forge this comprehensive knowledge partnership. The report outlines in some detail how these would work and how they could be implemented in a practical way. They include the signature of a UK-India treaty to mutually recognize each other's credits and qualifications so that we could put in place a system in which students could move more seamlessly between institutions in each other's countries. The building blocks include steps to ensure, for example, that the UK's Turing scheme supports a more balanced partnership in international education with India, with more UK students studying at Indian institutions. And of course, the building blocks include a call for provision of significantly increased funding and support for more resources for collaborative R&D so that we can make greater progress together, promoting frontier science within a framework providing for a shared commitment to academic freedom. These are the building blocks, among others, of the comprehensive knowledge partnership that I believe should be at the core of the UK-India revitalized relationship that the two countries are seeking.
Thank you, Joe, for this great overview of your report and its findings. And what is equally intriguing is that despite this being such an important facet of India-UK engagement and relationship and partnership over the years, we have not had any report of this kind before, and it's about time that perhaps in the larger foreign policy political environment that I think India and the UK find themselves in, that this report has come about. So congratulations once again to you and all your co-authors. Let me now turn to the two high commissioners for their views and for their observations on this very important report, who of course would be leading the effort in operationalizing the ideas that I have proposed. So let me first invite His Excellency Gayatri Kumar for her observations and comments. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Pant. First of all, I would like to congratulate you on this initiative and thank Lord Johnson for taking the trouble to read our new education policy and sort of examine it in great detail, and then read it from the perspective of cooperation between India and the UK, and for giving us so many recommendations and suggestions. It's a very important timing as well, because as High Commissioner Alex Ellis would completely endorse, we are at a very, very interesting and a very promising juncture as we start implementing the roadmap that has been drawn up. But before that, right now, he is in Delhi personally supervising the first round of our trade negotiations. Over the next 2 weeks, there are going to be intensive trade negotiations. And obviously, mobility and youth mobility and sharing and giving and taking, this is all going to be a part. And this will build the spirit of our cooperation for the rest of the year on a wide range of different subjects and themes. I'd like to acknowledge and say a big hello to Professor Kshitij Kapoor, my neighbor here at the King's College London, and I'm delighted to meet Professor Jagdish Kumar, Vice Chancellor of the JNU, and Ms. Anna Roy, Senior Advisor in the Niti Aayog. I'd like to say that, of course, I've gone through the study, the recommendations. I see that there is a huge background and already so much of work has been done on the UK and its other partners. And I've also looked at the recommendations. I'm going to be listening very carefully to the views of the educationists on this panel. But as a person who would be involved in implementation, I must say that I welcome the many very specific suggestions aimed at bridging premier UK institutions with their counterparts in India. And I see that, though the paper looks at opportunities from UK's perspective or a strategy from UK's perspective, there are so many things that I would like to say, and in response from the perspective of Government of India. Firstly, that, promoting collaboration in education with the UK is a key goal of the India-UK bilateral agenda. Our India-UK roadmap to 2030 reflects this in as many as 17 paras, in which we have identified specific themes and areas and initiatives. And our Prime Ministers are going to be monitoring this. They're going to be meeting soon in spring this year, and we will need to show them what we've done to realize the vision. Our Prime Minister is personally committed to the implementation and the success of the new education policy and internationalization of our and as Lord Johnson said, revolutionizing the landscape of higher education. And I have no doubt at all that this is going to happen at great speed, if it is going to be, that it is going to be monitored very, very carefully at the highest levels in our country. Coming to India, UK, as we speak, the number of Indian students in the UK is estimated at this moment to be around 55,000. I think that the post-study visa scheme has made UK a significantly more attractive destination for Indian students. And I'm aware that UK universities are gearing to see this number, and they would welcome seeing this number doubled. We at the High Commission have, over the last 18 months that I've been here we've been engaging very strenuously and enthusiastically with universities across the regions. My visits to the Swansea University, to the Cardiff University, Ulster, University of Edinburgh, Somerville College in Oxford, the range of sectors where Indian students are coming in droves, from public policy to engineering to sustainable development. It's really a very, very encouraging. And on each occasion, we've gathered from the faculty as well as students that there is a feeling that Indian students are valuable for their hard work and their good results. And the students themselves tell me that they find academics here a most enriching experience, and many more of their colleagues are, staying on to do PhDs and, higher education, take their study very much further, and in collaboration with the UK counterparts. Between our governments, of course, we have the India-UK Education and Research Initiative, which has supported more than 1,000 such partnerships in education and research since 2006. And the number of exchanges of academics, researchers, staff, and students is about 25,000. So, from our point of view, this is a very, very good number. But there is so much more scope, as Lord Johnson said, a huge potential, and it's really up to us to make it all happen. Phase 3 of this initiative, which was supposed to be completed in 2021, aims at promoting institutional and individual excellence in educational practices, research, and employability. This is important in our country, and this has had, of course, to be extended to March 2022 because it was moved online. But this initiative, the UK India Education and Research Initiative, now is going into the 4th phase, and that seeks to align its programs with the priorities identified in India's New Education Policy 2020. So that's something on which we really should focus our efforts in the coming year, meet often, brainstorm, and just try to channelize our energies and our resources and our the momentum in this on these priorities. The other one, that is the India-UK Qualification Recognition Task Force, has also been established by us under this same initiative. And I think I welcome the emphasis in the report on mutual recognition of credits and qualifications, as well as the suggestion of a formal bilateral understanding on this in the form of a treaty. This is Lord Johnson's recommendation, and having such an arrangement in place would simplify movement of students and also some sort of a portability of their credit scores between institutions of both countries. This would also support our government's objective of internationalization of Indian universities as envisaged in the NEP 2020. And this would be in consonance with the UK government's endeavors to promote UK as a destination for Indian students. And finally, I also would like to say, as Lord Johnson had said, that the recommendation in his report that 20% of the Turing scheme funds should be committed to support student mobility to India from the UK, recognizing that India is one of the most popular destinations for British students at the moment. I think that is something that we should work on. And if I may suggest, a deterrent that needs to be addressed is the longer and more tedious process required for visa applications, specifically for Indian students aspiring to apply in UK universities. There must have been good reasons to do this, but that's something that we can work on, because we find that Chinese students who are here also in huge numbers, they've been welcomed through a faster processing and a shorter processing of their visa applications. So the suggestion that this could be looked at, I hope it could be taken. I hope this can be taken on board. Then there is the suggestion in Lord Johnson's report that students be facilitated through commercial student loans. This is always an important facilitating factor. And of course, it's without any burden to the UK taxpayer. Finally, the recommendation of increased funding for collaborative research and development to promote frontier science. I'm confident that the results will more than justify this. Indian students and researchers have so much to bring to the table. I also find that the Department of International Trade has remarked that if export of higher education were to be quantified as an export item, then higher education would have counted as UK's single largest export to India. It is about 16% of UK's overall export. So the potential of transnational education, again referred to in the report, is worth pursuing to its logical conclusion. Of course, there may be a part of the report that, there may be parts that do not really which could not be implemented immediately, but I think these would indicate the direction in which we all can exert ourselves, and institutions on both sides should be involved in a more intensive way. And of course, India has one of the oldest traditions of international scholarly exchanges and famous universities which have been centers of learning, research, free flow of ideas, healthy debate and discussion. And of course, I would not like to forget to mention the GYAN, that is Global Initiatives for Academic Networks, and Vajra, the Visiting Advanced Joint Research Initiative, launched by our government and Department of Science, respectively. Again, these are aimed at inviting international academicians, scientists of repute, for short and long-term academic courses in India. Then, lastly, the Scheme for Promotion of Academic Research and Collaboration, an initiative of Government of India, facilitates the same kind of academic and research collaborations between top-ranked Indian institutions and globally ranked foreign institutions through joint research projects involving mobility of students and faculty. And as of 2019, pre-COVID, around 54 institutes from UK were collaborating in this Spark initiative. And as I mentioned, the foreign institutes of repute are invited to establish branches of their institutions in India. And we have, in fact, only last week shared the desire of our IITs to open campuses in the UK. And I must say that this has been well received by those with whom I've broached the idea. I'm extremely enthused at the responses. So this is another thing that I would be working on immediately to get the IITs and the interested universities here together. And I'd just like to conclude with a very frank comment that India would like her partners to consider India as more than just a market for education, because we seek to forge international knowledge relationships, as we believe in an ancient proverb that knowledge is the only wealth that, when shared, enriches both the giver and the receiver. And with these words, I look forward to listening to the views of the distinguished panelists today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for both identifying the challenges that are there as we build this partnership, as well as enumerating a number of steps that Government of India has taken on its path towards greater internationalization of higher education in India. Thank you. Let me now invite Alex Ellis, British High Commissioner to India, for his comments on the report.
Thanks very much indeed. That's really kind. Thank you to Yara for organising this. I think that Lord Johnson and my excellent colleague Gayatri have said most of what needs to be said. So let me try not to say it all again in my own voice, but try and say a couple of things which might be different. So you've got a couple of big drivers which are in the report for why we need to be doing this. Essentially, the extraordinary transformation which India, I think, will try to undergo in the next generation, as its demographic dividend is at its strongest, combined with what I hope Gabriel would agree is the speed of internationalization of India. You've seen it in businesses, you see it, I think, but how India is going to internationalize over this next generation as it seeks to get this great growth and education. Joe Johnson's already set out the numbers on students. But internationalization to work has to go two ways, I think, and not just one way. For the UK, there's a driver of being having left the European Union and a kind of partnership which is set out in the roadmap, which I got to refer to absolutely correctly. Both countries, of course, face the kind of bouncing back from COVID and how COVID has really accelerated the big macro trends of the assertion of China and the risks and vulnerabilities which come from that, as well as the opportunities. So, and in any case, both countries have to deal with two of the great challenges which the world will face for the next 30 years, which is how the human's relationship with their natural environment and human's relationship with technology. It strikes me that both India and the UK have a lot to offer on those two big challenges, which is good because we are amongst the biggest countries in the world. So there are pretty big macro reasons why you would want to be doing this, I think. I really liked the report. I thought it was excellent. I actually found it incredibly helpful, not least to give me some detail and some little nuance, including on the relevance of the price of gold to the number of students who'll be coming to the UK, which then all my colleagues, all my Indian colleagues looked and said, yes, of course. Yeah, this is, for some reason, Kerala. I shouldn't pick it out, Gayatri, given it. But people said, oh, yes, I'm in Kerala. It's all I think about. It's very interesting to see how those things do have an effect. So just taking those 5 ideas, I'm, like Gayatri, I'm doing a lot of it. It's interesting. Both Gayatri and I think in parallel doing an awful lot of visiting universities and so forth because it's such an obvious area of growth, I think. Although I see that Gayatri's visits seem to be mainly taking place outside England, I notice, going to the different parts of the United Kingdom, which is a very good thing and inspires me as well. India, of course, one of the joys of India being how dispersed knowledge is in India. It's not located in one or two places, it's actually extraordinarily dispersed around the country. And I think it's a great strength of the country, actually, to have so many good institutions in so many parts of it. So just taking the kind of 5 things which are really helpful. So one, we're committed under the roadmap, actually, to try and agree something on mutual recognition of qualifications. It's part, in fact, I think of the early harvest we're trying to get on the trade side. And we look like we're making some progress there, which is exciting. But I'm told we've many times nearly made progress before, not quite. The forces of inertia are powerful in any country, and including in ours. But I really hope for that. Secondly, I think that we are woefully ignorant in the United Kingdom about India. And so I really support what you were saying about Turing. In fact, I think India is 8th or 9th in the popularity. But and I'm going to say something which maybe is not the right thing to say, but I think that, what I hope is that that's not just people who know India very well already through having, Punjabi parents or whatever, and are sort of going back, as it were. People who don't know about anything about India need to be going to India. I think that's a big issue, actually. When I spoke to one of the deans of one of the excellent universities, he said, yeah, but, to attract Brits, you're going to have to get them a problem which is particular to India or particularly interesting in India, like some aspects of medicine, for example, some aspects of rural research. But I think we just need to give a big push on that. I really agree with what you've said there. The Indian student enrollment, Gayatri's already given the numbers. In fact, looking at the latest numbers, the Q3 migration statistics show that we gave 90,000, almost 91,000 student visas were issued in the last year. It's up 100%. So I'm very keen on targets which we can get past. I think I'm going to take Joe's targets of 100,000, and I think we could do it. But, and here, it's very unwise to ever not agree with Gayatri on anything, particularly in a session. But I think there is a risk we carry here. And that is the risk. We've been around this course before, yeah? We got very excited. We said, right, more Indian students. And then there was sufficient fraudulent use of the student routes that we changed our policy. And so the thing wasn't sustainable when we did this a decade ago. So we've got to make it sustainable now. That, I fear, does include having quite rigorous visa checks, because that's where some of the problems came before, if I understand it rightly. And the the paper makes very good points about that, Joe. I think you were sort of witness to some of that before, and how we would try and make a more sustainable and secure way of getting the flow of talented Indian students into the UK, which is what we want, and we want to sustain it. And of course, the changes in the migration policy have helped a lot, I think. And I too, like Gayatri, I noticed it's relevant as we launch the FDA to remind ourselves just how important that is to the UK economy in terms of exports. I hadn't realised it's the single biggest export, I think, that we have to India is higher education. A point worth reminding is, as we sweat over whiskey tariffs, there are some other things going on which have a big effect, and also enormously mutually beneficial effect. Not that drinking whiskey, Scotch, would have anything other than mutually beneficial effect for all concerned. The financing point is very interesting, and I sort of hope that, and actually at the beginning of the session I just watched up the head of HSBC here, because you would think that good, shrewd financial institutions see huge opportunity in cross-border student finance, because those are sort of the sorts of clients you want to attract if you're presenting yourself as a UK and India financial institution. So you would hope the market actually, as well as Gayatri was saying, would fill some of this gap. On the R&D side, the good news is actually we do quite a lot already. I suspect Joe will understand better than I do the kind of reorganisation of R&D financing in the UK, big numbers, but we have to work out how that actually turns into international financing. And we do a lot, particularly on climate. If you think about one of those big challenges about the relationship with humans and their natural environment, actually a hell of a lot goes on there. I would just sort of make 2 points on that. One, I would hope that research is having an impact beyond the UK and India. And we know there are some examples where it is, that you really want to be using some of that research which is impacting on other parts of the world. So the combination of the two countries, as we've seen in the case of the Covishield vaccine, actually can have big global impacts. And that's one of the things I think we should be aiming for. And the two governments, I think, are very aligned on this and wanting to have that impact beyond our shores. The second is, the issues of trust around research are important. So it's interesting to me to see that even though it's a small number, UKRI actually have just started a bit of work with India about 5G networks and future telecoms. And I think that's the sort of area where we're going to be needing to do more research with high trust partners like India. So it's a great report. I fear that mobility will always be a big issue, and I think it's one of the hardest ones to crack, but actually requires quite a lot of effort. To reassure Gayatri and others, I fear that the exception is not India in terms of the way students are treated, but China. And indeed, students are actually treated like all students from many other parts of the world, and that is obviously a standout point, and one which Joe addresses in your report as well. So it's really helpful because I think this is. We had the two prime ministers signing the roadmap last year. This is the year of delivery, where we try and turn that aspiration into reality. In a lot of areas, I think well on trade, actually. I think we've done quite a lot. We've seen that. We're not doing as well as we should be on mobility. There's no doubt about that. We're sort of nudging it forward in defence on security. But I think the long-term gains of having a flow of talented people going between these two countries to study and to research is probably worth more than pretty much anything else. 100 years ago, brilliant Indians were going to the UK sometimes to learn how that they would try and get rid of the UK's rule from India, which I don't blame them for doing at all, and they did a very good job of it. I don't know whether that was in reaction to being taught at Harrow School. I wouldn't blame them if it was, but now I think we have enormous mutual interest and trust, actually, in education, in working together. So I very much hope that is something we can make a lot of progress on this year. So thank you for the report.
Thank you, Alex, for those comments. And now let me quickly jump in for to my panelists here, Professor Kshitish Kapoor, Professor Jagdish Kumar, and Ms. Anna Roy, for their observations, comments on this report. And one aspect, and I would like to start, Joe, if you don't mind, with you once again, because this is an interesting report. I mean, in some ways, it speaks to our times, right? It used to be said that, look, knowledge engagement should be one way of bridging geopolitical divide. Now we are turning it on its head, and we are saying that, look, the kind of geopolitical environment that we live in allows us this opportunity to use knowledge partnership, to give a new momentum to this knowledge partnership. So I see this report not simply as a report on UK-India education partnership, but also in the kind of geopolitical environment that we exist today. And Alex here used the terms like trust, in high-end technology cooperation. I think this also is a report that is speaking to some of the broader macro issues of our times. So how do you situate this? You in your initial remarks, you drew this comparison with China, but I think standing on its own merit today, when you look at India and UK trying to respond to some of their foreign policy, geopolitical, geoeconomic challenges, how do you look at this, the possibility of this knowledge partnership actually resolving some of the geopolitical challenges?
Well, I think that the two high commissioners put it very well in their interventions, Harsh. I mean, we have so much in common as countries and as societies. We have shared interests and shared values, and deepening the people-to-people ties and deepening our research relationships can only deepen these relationships further. I think there is a sort of a sense in which there is no downside to our countries from intensifying the knowledge economy relationship. There is only good that can come of it: deeper understanding of the way we each see the world, greater progress in expanding the frontiers of human knowledge, greater progress in dealing with some of the great challenges that we both face together in common with many other countries around the world. And we've seen it over the course of the last few years in how we're working together on the pandemic, on issues relating to climate change, on how we deal with the factors that drive extremism around the world, which confront both our societies. So to my mind, there is no downside, and a huge amount to be gained from throwing everything we can at putting in place the comprehensive knowledge partnership this report advocates.
Professor Kapoor, if I can come to you for your observations, comments on this report and its findings, as well as I think a point that is reverberating across this report, and of course the previous report on China, that how do you, as an educationist, trying to expand the British education's footprint across countries, how do you deal when geopolitics enters the discussion? There's clearly a challenge about growing dependencies on China within higher education and research systems. There is an acknowledgement that certain countries perhaps can be trusted more. As an educationist, how do you deal with that?
Thank you very much, Harsh, for the invitation to join this distinguished panel, and thank you for your question. Before I start, can I just put in a personal disclaimer? This discussion is of intense interest to me because as a child, I grew up on the grounds of IIT Delhi. I went to one of the great Indian institutions and now have the privilege of being here at King's College London. So in many ways, I'm a child of a knowledge partnership and delighted to be asked to speak on this. Now, the issue of how do we as universities deal with the issue of geopolitics, I think the first thing is to insulate our students from it. It is very important that the campus itself not become a replica of all the tensions that are there in the world. We are here for knowledge. We are here for freedom of expression and freedom of speech. This is not to say that the reality does not impinge upon the campus, but I really see it as my first responsibility to serve all our students in a way that is free from the geopolitical world. So that's how we approach that. But just if I may, to comment on the report, I have to say I like reports that are daring, that expose something, that show promise and potential, and I think, Joe, your report did that all. Very quickly, what I thought was daring was your suggestion of the loan scheme, and this may have escaped others because it probably didn't scare them. It is that your call was for a sector-backed loan scheme, which is, in other words, universities would team together to provide some kind of a collateral. I think that's a very interesting idea. Perhaps it can't be globally done for all of our courses, but it would be very worth exploring. And I think it is a daring suggestion, but I think it needs to be explored. The thing that to me was a bit of an expose, if you may, is really the remarkably poor performance of either UK or India, but more are bilateral along the Turing scheme. I'd call it remarkably poor because I look at the number of the cultural affinity. We know so much about each other. We even play cricket. I mean, how many nations in this world play that game? And yet, despite all that cultural affinity, many people who have that joint heritage, we are so low on the list of that bilateral exchange. And I think that's certainly a wake-up call. Where I saw promise and potential is what you pointed out about research. I was very struck that the little we do together is of such high quality. And I think that is really impressive. And the potential that I see there is in drawing together our early career researchers. Because of the way the world has become flat with all the new media and technology, I think our early career researchers are, both from a knowledge and a social perspective, much closer at this stage of their careers than we were perhaps 30 years ago. So I think betting on them to bring our nations together is not only more likely, has a much greater long-term potential. So look, thank you for drawing our attention to all of these. And my last call would be, this is of course UK's perspective. What would be marvelous is to actually, Joe, see your report, hopefully even with your involvement, reflected through the eyes of Indian colleagues. And then we can find the real meeting ground. But thank you very much for what you've done.
Thank you. And on this note, I think let me bring Professor Kumar here from his perspective, from his vantage point. How does he look at the report and some of the findings? And given that he leads a premier Indian university like JNU, what are the challenges here in terms of primarily looking at this through an Indian lens, as Professor Kapoor has pointed out?
Thank you. While I greet all the distinguished panelists here, I'm glad to know that Professor Kapoor, he lived on the grounds of IIT Delhi, where I'm also a professor of electrical engineering at IIT Delhi. I have gone through the report. I think it's a great effort at looking at the possibilities of enhancing the UK-India knowledge partnership. I have listened to the distinguished colleagues who have expressed their views from a global perspective and also from the UK perspective. So as an Indian academician, I would like to very briefly say a couple of things from the Indian perspective. You know, India has one of the largest educational systems in the world. We have close to about 300 million students in our schools, colleges, and universities. And out of that, nearly 40 million students are in higher educational institutes. And there was a reference to national education policy by many of you. But if you look at the 5 pillars on which the NEP is built upon, access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. So in these 5 pillars, 2 are very, very important: affordability and equity. Because in India, education is considered as a fundamental right, and education is almost at no cost. For example, in my own university, Jawaharlal Nehru University, our annual tuition fee is maybe around £3. It is 300 rupees per annum. So that being the situation in India, where we are, with the help of the implementation of the national education policy, we would like to enable students from across the social spectrum of our country to gain knowledge and become creative and innovative. Having said that, let us look at a few areas in which we can actually collaborate and expand the boundaries of knowledge through collective efforts. One of the things that I think we could do, and through my own experience I am telling this, is the institutional collaboration for carrying out research in some of the emerging areas where we have good expertise and you also have good expertise. One area you have already mentioned, 5G communications. Today, India is also focusing very seriously in areas such as drone technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence, data science, and so on. These are some of the areas I think we should look for institutional collaboration. And in addition to that, you know, just as India is looking at the possibility of having some of the great institutions from across the world to come here and set up their campuses, India is also looking at internationalizing our own education. For example, we have some great institutes in the country, and can they establish campuses in other countries? So is this an area that we can possibly look at? Can India establish, by some of the best institutes, a campus in UK, just as UK can establish a campus or a couple of campuses in India? I think this is one area to strengthen our educational collaboration and cooperation we could look at. But two more areas where perhaps Indian students can benefit without having to go to UK but access their education. During the COVID pandemic, we have seen how much the Indian government has put efforts to introduce digital technology, not only in higher education but even at the school education level. And remarkably, Indians are very good at adopting. Just as almost the entire India has shifted without having a landline phone to mobile technologies, today I can very convincingly say that almost all higher educational institutes have now adopted the digital technology. Now, as part of NEP, recently we have introduced two very interesting schemes which may be of interest to you. For example, in higher educational institutes, a student in a given program can take up to 40% of credits from any of the other higher educational institutes. So, is there a possibility that some of these credits can be obtained from the UK universities through online medium while the students are studying in Indian universities? This is a possibility that we can look at. The other very interesting thing that we are introducing in our higher educational institutions is to make our educational programs very flexible. For example, we have now come up with a scheme called the Academic Bank of Credits. As part of this, a student may not be registered in any particular university as a regular student, but they can accumulate credits from different educational institutes and put it in the Academic Bank of Credits. And once these credits cross certain threshold required for awarding a certificate, diploma, or degree, then a degree can be given to the student. Can the Indian universities and the UK universities work in this area to provide this kind of facility to the Indian students? So there are many exciting possibilities where we can definitely join hands. I think this report paves the way to take up many of these activities to strengthen the bilateral relation between UK and India in the education sector. So with those comments, I would like to conclude here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kumar. Let me now invite Ms. Roy for her observations on the report, on the findings, on what has been said earlier. But also, Ms. Roy, if you could elaborate a bit on the vision behind India's new education policy and what it strives to do, especially when it comes to internationalization of higher education in India. Over to you, Ms. Roy.
Thank you, Professor Pant. First of all, a disclaimer: I am not a education specialist, and so after hearing such you speak about the sector, I will not like to comment on the NEP. I think the report has dealt with NEP quite well. It has been examined, so I don't think have the capability to come, but it's a very forum. I would like to pick from some of the interventions made by my previous speakers. Start with Her Excellency Ms. Gayatri Kumar, when she said that India is not seen as a market, that we work in collaboration. And I have experienced it while implementing such collaboration with the UK DIT. Niti Aayog had a program to implement some of the tech developed in the healthcare sector in the UK and India, and over the course of the the implementation, there were several ups and downs, which kind of highlighted the different vision that the two sides had. But it was successful in the sense we may not have adopted, say, 5 technologies which the UK side wanted, but we actually did adopt one technology developed in UK, but customized for Indian condition. So I think especially in emerging technology, when we talk about collaboration, I think it will augur well for both the sides to understand the nuances of the technology and how you cannot really parachute technology developed in one country in another country. It has to be kind of, it has to be validated, it has to be developed for the particular populace for which it is targeted for them. So that's the first point. And I think collaboration is the key. Professor Kumar mentioned about the emerging technology. I actually in Niti Aayog had the emerging technology and data management vertical. So that is something which we are very keen on collaborating. In 2018 when we brought out the national strategy on AI, collaboration was the key cornerstone, where the point was that we need not reinvent the wheel, we need to work together in a win-win situation. So understanding the aspirations and needs of both the sides is important. And under a overall, I think we already have some structure and institutional structure in place. I think it's important to forge more micro connections to see that research in this emerging area gets promoted. Based on our experience in the past, what we felt was the best way would be to kind of join hands with the academic institute. So with that goal, we have developed a COE, a Center of Excellence concept to be housed in IIT Madras. And this is not a COE where, you look, there is a fund, so you develop a COE. That I feel wherever funds come in, then all, I personally feel, availability of funds is important, but it also kind of does not put you under sufficient pressure to come out with a sustainable and workable scheme. So we have developed the concept of COE, and I feel a one-to-one relation where researchers get the opportunity of not only knowledge sharing, but also access to each other's, basically each other's institutions, each other's other resources to further research in a collaborative manner. This COE we actually anchored against responsible AI, which we feel is a very important part of this emerging dialogue. And so in other areas also, the other area which we are now presently focusing is EdTech. How the technology in education, which has really seen quite an acceleration post the pandemic, how that ecosystem is developing, and what we need to do so that when we talk about regulation, it's not a very high-handed regulation, it is a regulation with an innovation bias. Because when we talk about frontier technology, their regulation is important, but to promote innovation is equally important. So the two sides can work together, I feel, in the area of education, like in the health tech. So whatever technologies are being developed, how do you deploy it? How do you adapt it? How do you use it? And how do you promote joint research? I think that is what going forward, the research area is something which we should look forward, and it's such a good today we have both the high commissioners in the panel, so I would urge both of them to look into this issue and see besides the big picture, if we can also forge these sector specific, subject specific, technology specific collaborations and with some result oriented initiatives that will really go a long way, and there at least some platform where we can share what, say, where I am working, Niti Aayog, what it is doing, and to look for our partners in the UK research field. That would really be helpful, and it's so nice to hear Professor Kapoor on this subject, and really look forward to keeping this engagement, and hope that I'll get a chance to continue this dialogue offline also, so that we see how we can look for partners in our initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Kumar, if I can come back to you on a point that this report mentions, and I think is something that is also perhaps important to understand as you have outlined what perhaps needs to be done. One question that I think is often asked is why has the Indian higher education system been reticent in building global partnerships so far? I mean, I think the comparisons that have been done often with countries like China, for example, or Japan, or even South Korea, you do not see that kind of internationalization in the Indian context. What has prevented that from happening? And as you draw out a plan of action for the future, what are some of the key points that you would highlight, apart from some of the things that you've already talked about in terms of institutional building, etc.?
Perhaps what you said is only partially right. If you refer to the scale at which we are doing, yes, we could have done at a higher scale. But in terms of the international collaboration, because I come from an IIT system and I have worked at JNU for the last more than 5 years as its Vice Chancellor, I know that we have many international collaborations, and we work on many joint programs. For example, at JNU itself, we have a global student program where we bring students from nearly 30 countries to our institute, and they stay here for a semester, study, take the courses, and then go back. But what is the major bottleneck in these kind of international collaborations is that when the international students come to our campus, for example, we provide almost a free hostel. The food cost is very, very low, and our tuition fees are very low. But when we want to send our own students to the other institutes, the expenditure is too high. The costs are too high for our students to bear. So this is one thing I think we need to work around the solutions, and so that, see, unless there is more mobility of the faculty members and the students, it is not possible to build stronger relations between the institutions. And this is where I think we are finding it a bit problematic. But one more thing I would like to emphasize here, that as I said in the beginning, one of the important components of NEP is affordability, because in India, education is not considered as a commodity. It is, we aim to provide it to every Indian who would like to study in the colleges and the schools. So therefore, if any foreign university would like to come to India, from the perspective of revenue generation, perhaps that may not be a good model to work in building better collaborations with India. So the education that the other universities can provide should be affordable, so that more Indians can be attracted to these universities for collaborative work between two countries.
Professor Kapoor, can I invite your thoughts on some of the issues that Professor Kumar is raising about affordability, about mobility of faculty and students, and some of the bottlenecks, and what perhaps from a UK education system, things that can be done to ameliorate some of these questions over the long term, because I think this continues to be a key bottleneck even as we speak.
And I dare say it will continue to be. a key bottleneck. I mean, if we actually examine the strata of people from India who can access UK education at international fees level, you're talking about the top 2%. So I think if we really want to be a part of India's real challenge, as expressed in the NEP, I think we have to find a way how we can merge our expertise and skill, whatever it is, with I think, scale. Because our current model is not extensible if you wish to address the 98% that's not addressed with our current international fees model. And I think that's where perhaps what Anna said provides us with a possibility that if there is a way to scale knowledge and keep it cost efficient, educational technology, as in tech, may be the key. Because our traditional model of bringing them all into a class in the middle of London isn't going to be the answer. So I think if there is a promise, and that's what I saw really as the promise in, Joe, your call for partnership, it would be partnering somewhere the skill, technology, the curriculum we have with local knowledge, but interestingly enough, with actually pioneering knowledge about educational technology in India. So I think that's the real possibility. What's in it for the UK is I think we learn how to do what we do better. Because I think our own challenges with educating the breadth of our population haven't gone away. We may not have the same percentage challenge, but it's not that everyone who wishes to go to university here at the moment can, or that we have the right models for them. So I think there'll be a lot of learning to that, and the ed tech may be one great possibility around which we could collaborate.
Thank you, Professor Kapoor. And let me give the final word to Joe. Joe, you have heard a lot of comments and observations on your report. Are there any key takeaways you want to elaborate on as we conclude the session?
Well, thank you, Harsh. I mean, I'm just delighted that there's support for many of the recommendations in the report, enthusiasm for deepening the knowledge relationship between India and the UK, and there's a process to actually make that happen in the form of the trade negotiations that are now underway in Delhi. So the opportunity is there for the taking. There is a real alignment of appetite in both countries, and really we've now just got to make it happen. The upside of deepening these ties is enormous. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Delhi and from London in due course as to progress in these important negotiations that are now underway. But I want to thank you, Harsh, and the ORF for convening this webinar. I want to thank the two High Commissioners for taking the time out of their busy schedules to reflect on its recommendations, and also our very distinguished leaders from academia, from King's, JNU, and NITI Aayog, of course, for their part in coming to today's webinar. So thank you all very much for looking at the report and thinking about it.
Let me also thank you all for joining us today. And as Joe said, this is something that we should, now it is time for implementation. And I hope that those on the panel here and elsewhere will take most of these recommendations forward. As I think the report mentions, this can be a game changer, or potentially has opportunity or the potential to be the game changer in the UK-India relationship. So thank you all once again for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.